and try to walk in so they don't pay the $15 fee.
Right.
And that's a shame, really, because you can have a car full of people for $15 a day. So, I mean, you can use the barbecue, the washrooms, you can swim safe, all that.
Yep.
So then I cracked down on it and I started putting sign no parking and sending bylaw to a ticket. But now with social media, you can't keep anything away anymore.
I think Fitzroy is the only place where I've ever had someone check my fishing license, but like a couple of times at Fitzroy. And I'm sorry, I call them Ranger Tim. I don't mean to pick on Tim, but the conservation officers, we call them Ranger Tims, the ones who come see you at 11:30 at night when the radio might be a little too loud. But Fitzroy is the only place where I've ever had Ranger Tims come and check my license.
And funny, they drive around, check you have, make sure you have the pass, like you didn't come illegal. Oh yeah, they do. They have a couple.
Who's with you?
What's with the new addition? She's gonna steal the show today.
Yep. So my wife is dropping off my other daughter at daycare, so it's me and Madeline. How are you guys doing?
Oh wow.
Well, good morning, Madeline. I think that's the first we've seen you.
You say hi? No, you can't do much, eh? Not much.
Beautiful.
Everybody's doing well? Jeff, you had a pretty epic road trip.
It was epic enough. I don't know. I survived the Fredericton to Moncton route. That's the worst stretch of highway in Canada or in North America. It's just so boring. Moose fence.
It's gotta be.
We used to take the Renoose to cut over to Miramichi. So you cut off the Transcan before it all got 4-laned. You would cut off the Transcan at Plaster Rock and take this logging road across, and that kept you awake.
Yeah,
you paid a lot of attention. But
you ever driven between Brandon, Manitoba, and Calgary?
No, I haven't. We've gotten a little bit far out of Brandon, but we stopped and deked down into the States. Oh no, sorry. Absolutely. When I was a kid, I love it. Right, it's just that flat, straight, and then like you start to see the grain towers on the horizon. And you get to the town.
Just canola on both sides.
Yeah, it's gorgeous out there. I really do need to try to do that trip again soon.
I miss it out there too. I spent 3 years living out near Brandon, Manitoba, and do miss it. People are just so lovely.
The Dakotas we did a few years ago, and just the huge giant sunflower fields.
Oh, unbelievable, eh?
Yeah, it's Natalie just had a smile on her face for hours at a time, just sunflower fields. It was absolutely beautiful.
I got lost in a sunflower field once, so I have some weird fear of sunflowers. So I know we're live right now, Kelly. I'm exposing that to the world. I also hate bats. Bats freak me out too. But anyway, they're beautiful, but that's where it ends.
So sunflowers are Chair Tierney's clowns.
That's right. And bats. Definitely bats.
It's the whale that lives in your dreams, eh?
Good morning, guys. Good morning, Laura, Teresa.
Morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations, Matt.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm watching this little one while Libby goes to daycare, so you get to meet her. This is Maddie.
Oh, wow. Maddie. We got Matt and Maddie.
Like Madeline, yeah.
Yeah.
She's yawning already. Is that how boring this committee is? It must
no, gosh, no. She only really does 3 things, and well, I guess yawning being the third, but it's a precursor to sleeping.
Oh goodness.
Nobody?
We have about 2 minutes.
You see everybody?
It'll be interesting to talk to the 2-year-olds. Like, right, I know there's there'll be years of studies coming out of this pandemic, but that'll be one of the interesting ones. Those 2-year-olds who have only ever seen, a very large number of them who have only ever seen their parents interact with other people on a screen.
We're pretty lucky. Libby's been in daycare for the entirety of the pandemic. Well, I guess, since last year around this time. So just the beginning of the kind of the middle to, I want to say end, really, really badly.
We'll call it that.
Yeah,
for now, anyways. So
she's got a little group of friends. So we'll go to the park and she'll run up to people and say hi and interact with them. So that's okay. Good. But for the parents that had children about a year ago, you're right. Yeah, they've only really ever interacted with anybody other than probably just a very small group like grandmas and grandpas, maybe. Yeah. No, it'll be an interesting sociological study, that's for sure.
Morning, Riley. Oh, great.
Hey, Riley.
Here we go.
How is everyone?
Terrific.
Love seeing the baby. The baby's fantastic.
Awake right now. Yeah.
It's funny. The library board has had its share of babies.
Oh yes, that's right. Alexandra had a baby earlier this, I think 2 weeks ago as well.
And Mary Rose.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Something about libraries and babies, I guess. And on that note, it is now 9:30. I'm just going to go ahead, Cal, if it looks like we're pretty good here. I'll just go into the administrative fun stuff. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Transportation Committee. Before we proceed, we'll do a quick roll call and remind everyone we need 6 members present to maintain quorum. Kelly?
Councillor Luloff? I saw you
present.
in your baby. Councillor Dudas? Councillor El Shantiri?
Present.
Councillor Deans? I don't think she's joined yet. Councillor Fleury?
Bonjour.
Councillor Menard?
Present.
Councillor Kitts?
I'm here.
Councillor Darouz?
Here.
Councillor Hubley?
Here.
Vice Chair Leeper?
Good morning.
And the chair.
Great, present. Thank you. We have no regrets, and thanks, Councillor Luloff, for popping on today. I appreciate it with Maddie. We have no declarations of interest. Confirmation of the minutes, minutes 20 July 5th, 2021. Are these carried or confirmed?
Okay.
Thank you. We have response to inquiries. We have telecom work, city right of way, and private property. That's now what we have. We have 2 items on the agenda where we have presentations. So item 1, Blair Road Transit Priority Quarter Environmental Assessment Study recommendations. We do have a presentation, so we'll hold that item. Item number 2, cargo power assisted bicycles, e-cargo bikes, a pilot project. We do have a presentation and 1 delegation, so we'll hold that item. Item number 3, Gateway speed zone in Old Ottawa East, the Glebe and the Glebe Annex. We have no delegations, no presentations, and no correspondence. If no one wants to hold this item, is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Mr. Chair, just a comment, if you don't mind, it's extremely short.
Please.
I want to thank Councillor Menard. As you know, we do share a southern boundary, and I guess Councillor Menard's northern boundary. So we are working with city staff as part of the Greenfield and Lee's elements to complete and tie in those. So just we got requests from the community and wanted to, for the record, to clarify that element. So thank you, Councillor Menard, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the quick jump in here.
Yeah, no problem, Councillor Fleury, and that's echoed. So on that item, is it carried?
Carried.
Great. Item number 4, always stop controls at Evelyn Avenue and Chestnut Street and Harvard Avenue and Chesley Street. No delegations, presentations, or correspondence on this item. Is this item carried?
Yes.
Great. Item number 5, reduction of speed limit on Main Street to 40 kilometers an hour. Again, no presentations, delegations, or correspondence. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Item number 6, speed reduction from 50 kilometers to 40 kilometers an hour on Paul Anka Drive between Hunt Club and MacArthur Road. No delegations, presentations, or correspondence. Is this item carried?
Carried.
And item number 7, status update, Transportation Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending August 20th, 2021. If no delegations, presentations, or correspondence on this one as well, is this item carried? Great, thank you very much, everyone. I'll go right to item number 1. As we get the presenters ready, I just want to say a big thanks to Vivi, the entire team, the Montreal Blair Road Transit Priority Corridor Environmental Assessment Study that affects wards 13, 11, and 2. There's been a lot of work done on this one over the last couple of years. I know Councillor King and I and Dudas have been at many meetings and talked to many people. So I really look forward to this presentation. And at the end of this presentation, we do actually have one delegation, Chris Greensfields from the Vanier Community Association. So we'll start with the presentation, then we'll go to delegations and then questions to staff. Vivi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have a comprehensive presentation for you today on a really important transit priority project. The team, as you have mentioned, we did spend a lot of time consulting and investigating many options, and the resulting recommended plan balances many of these complex issues in this corridor. So our presentation will be delivered today by Katarina Svetkovic. She's the studies project manager, and with us also is Frank McKinney, program manager for transportation EAs. And we also have from Parsons, the consulting firm assisting us, and that would be Ron Clark and Paul Croft. So I now turn it over to Katarina to continue with to start the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Tierney and committee members, and thank you, Mrs. Chi, for the introduction. So I will, I'm pleased to provide you with this presentation, which summarizes the recommendations of the environmental assessment study for the Montreal Road and Blair Road transit priority corridors. Next slide, please. This project is a city building investment that helps the city to achieve its goals as set out in the official plan and transportation master plan. Montreal Road and a section of Blair Road have been identified as transit priority corridors and cycling spine routes. The goal of this EA was to prepare the recommended plan and functional design for transit priority measures and active transportation improvements. The study identifies right-of-way requirements to be protected from encroaching development for future project implementation. The recommendations will also support planned growth and inform surrounding land use planning and development. The study area for Montreal Road extends from Saint Laurent Boulevard to the proposed Montreal LRT station in the east. This arterial main street serves employment, commercial, and institutional land uses, as well as established residential neighborhoods and the growing community of Wateridge Village. At the east end of the corridor, the EA design will tie in with planned roadway modifications at the future Montreal station. The study area also included lands immediately east of Montreal station, near the interchange with Highway 174. The goal was to determine the preferred location for a new bus turnaround and layover facility to help serve Montreal station. The Blair Road corridor extends from north of Montreal Road to the intersection of Blair Road and Highway 174 at the existing Blair LRT station. This corridor supports residential, employment, and commercial land uses. Next slide, please. As described in our report, there are many benefits to the study's recommended plan. It supports transit by providing transit priority measures where they're most needed based on future 2046 travel demand projections. It supports existing and potential new bus routes and service changes to accommodate shifts in travel demand and provide increased connectivity to Montreal and Blair stations. It results in improved bus stop configurations and amenities to enhance the transit customer experience while addressing accessibility standards. It includes comprehensive improvements for cyclists and pedestrians, including new continuous segregated cycle tracks, wider sidewalks, a multi-use pathway, and protected intersections to provide for safer movement for all modes. In addition, changes to traffic signal timing will give priority to pedestrians and cyclists and provide for fully protected left turn phases at intersections. Next slide, please. The implementation of the recommended plan will help support the city's climate change objectives by helping increase the modal shift to sustainable transportation. The coordinated transit priority measures and improved active transportation facilities will support frequent transit service and improve equity by improving transit, pedestrian, and cycling modal choice. The plan also identifies opportunities for public realm and urban design improvements. These public places will provide space for tree planting, landscaping, seating and rest areas, street furniture, and snow storage. The general purpose vehicle capacity will remain the same as it is today, 2 lanes in each direction on Montreal Road and 1 lane in each direction for Blair Road. Capacity improvements are recommended at some intersections. Next slide, please. The recommended plan for Montreal Road will result in new transit priority measures that will add segments of curbside bus lanes. Also recommended are shorter queue-jump bus lanes at key locations and major intersections. These elements are shown in red on this slide and identified in the staff report. Next slide, please. The effectiveness of transit priority lanes will be further enhanced by combining them with transit signal priority where possible. Transit priority lanes will be shared with right-turning vehicles in some locations to minimize right-of-way requirements. Overall, the recommended transit priority measures will result in a similar level of service as continuous bus lanes, but with reduced property impacts. When implemented, these measures will provide travel time benefits and increase reliability in transit service in the corridor. Next slide, please. Montreal Road is a design priority area that will benefit from public realm improvements. The protected right-of-way will provide sufficient space for urban placemaking elements, such as you see on these vignettes. These could include wayfinding signage, distinctive surfaces, benches, pedestrian lighting, trees and low-maintenance landscaping, bicycle parking, and public art. The design will encourage transit-oriented development and regeneration of existing development. Next slide, please. The representative cross-sections of the recommended plan for Montreal Road are shown on the next 2 slides. Cross-sections vary throughout the corridor since transit priority lanes will be added only to some segments. However, new cycle tracks, wider sidewalks, improved bus platforms, and increased boulevard space are recommended throughout, and they're included in all cross-sections. Next slide, please. Most of the property requirements can be accommodated within the official plan protected right-of-way of 37.5 meters. Some properties will be impacted where the existing right-of-way is less than that, as well as where additional widening is required to implement the plan. Next slide, please. Now, shifting over to Blair Road. For Blair Road, south of Montreal Road to Blair Station, the recommended plan incorporates isolated transit priority measures and improvements to active transportation. Key elements of the plan include combination of cycle tracks and multi-use pathway throughout the study area, protected intersections at key locations, at Claver Street, a new signalized intersection to help pedestrians access bus stops and the multi-use pathway, and other road modifications as identified in the functional design. Next, please. This figure shows a representative cross-section for Blair Road between Montreal and Ogilvie Roads looking south. For most of this section, the roadway will remain 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, with turn lanes at intersections. To accommodate the recommended plan, the existing Blair Road right-of-way will be utilized more fully. Also, the corridor will need to be widened, primarily along the west side of Blair Road, where the use of Hydro 1 lands will be required to accommodate the new multi-use pathway. Next slide, please. These vignettes depict improved active transportation facilities and bus stops on Blair Road. The new cycle track, improved sidewalk, and a new multi-use pathway will significantly improve connectivity, and enhanced bus stop configurations and amenities will improve transit customer experience. Next slide, please. Near the future Montreal station, a new bus loop is recommended to support local bus operations and future bus network changes, which could be made in coordination with the opening of the Stage 2 East LRT extension to Orleans. The bus loop will include turnaround and parking spaces for OC Transpo buses, a facility for bus operators, and landscaping and stormwater management features. Next slide, please. The bus loop's recommended location is in the northeast corner of the Saint Joseph Boulevard and Highway 174 interchange. This site is entirely on city-owned land. It is an optimal location given it is just east of Montreal Station, has effective access and egress opportunity for buses, and no additional property is required for implementation. Next slide, please. To implement the bus turnaround, some modifications on Saint Joseph Boulevard in front of the bus loop will be needed. These include a new eastbound left turn lane for buses to access the bus loop, shorter westbound right turn lane to Highway 174 on-ramp, and a new cycle track and sidewalk adjacent to the bus loop. The facility will be designed to retain flexibility to accommodate the potential for further development of this site. Next slide, please. Comprehensive consultation was conducted throughout the study. It included 3 rounds of meetings with consultation groups, 2 public open houses, and numerous individual stakeholder meetings. Feedback included input from Indigenous peoples, the Accessibility Advisory Committee representative, and the Urban Design Review panel. The project website provided study information, and consultation events were advertised through newspapers, emails, buck slips, and social media. Feedback was received in meetings, by phone, email, and via an online survey. Next slide, please. Overall, there is strong public support for the proposed improvements to transit infrastructure, multimodal connectivity to LRT stations, cycling and pedestrian facilities, tree planting, and public spaces. Some issues were raised during consultation that have been addressed as best as possible. Concerns were raised about impacts to some commercial and residential properties from which land will be required. Property impacts have been minimized where possible as part of the refinement of the preferred design. Further refinement may be possible at the detailed design phase. Also, a scenario was evaluated that included lane reductions on Montreal Road, wherein 2 of the 4 travel lanes would be used as bus-only lanes. The study concluded that a significant reduction in vehicle volumes would be required for this scenario to function, and there are no suitable alternative corridors in proximity to Montreal Road to accommodate the diverted traffic. Keeping the existing vehicular capacity is required based on historical traffic volumes, significant potential for future growth and development in the corridor and the area, and the road's role and function as an arterial in the city's roadway network. The EA study design will tie in to the Montreal Road revitalization project west of Saint Laurent Boulevard. This will provide an opportunity to extend the revitalization easterly and provide continuous active transportation facilities within the entire corridor. Next slide, please. Our study identifies an opportunity to implement this project in a phased manner, as identified in the staff report and on this slide. Phasing will be dependent on funding availability, critical travel demand, development and intensification, asset renewal needs, and council priorities. Next slide, please. Project costs were developed in accordance with the council-approved project delivery review and cost estimating process for implementing capital projects. The estimated total cost that includes design, construction, property, public art, and contingencies in 2021 dollars is approximately $150 million. Approximately 1.95 hectares in total of public and private lands will be required to implement the project. The completion of this EA study is required to support the implementation of the future capital project, with funds to be identified through future budgets. Next slide, please. So following council approval of the report's recommendations, the municipal class environmental assessment process will be completed as follows. We'll finalize the environmental study report and post it for the 30-day public review period this fall. We'll address comments received during the review period and achieve the approval of the EA study by the end of the year. The study recommendations will help inform the TMP update, development applications, and future planning and design of the Montreal and Blair Road corridors. Next slide, please. Chair Tierney, that concludes our presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to present the recommended plan.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. As mentioned, we do have a delegation and terrific work, Catalina. Just spectacular. And we've been working on this for a long time. As we wait, we'll wait for Chris Greenshields from the Vanier Community Association is coming into the room as a delegation.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Chris. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. The Vanier Community Association actively participated in the consultations concerning the study over the past several years. The VCA's interest was heightened by its engagement with the city over the past number of years concerning the Montreal Road revitalization project, now nearing completion, by the Montreal Road District Secondary Plan, which extends to in the east to Saint Laurent. I thank the studies team for their engagement and willingness to listen throughout the consultations. I'm disappointed by the lack of ambition reflected in the study's recommendations, particularly that stretch between the Aviation Parkway and Saint Laurent. I hope that a similar study now approved by Council for Saint Laurent will be more aggressive in support of public transit. I was also disappointed that the staff report failed to reflect the recommendations of the Urban Design Review Panel, many of which I commend to the committee's attention, even if the staff report has not addressed them. We, of course, welcome the cycle tract and the MUP on Blair, and we see that this will help connect to the city's major investments in safe cycling along Montreal Road to the west of Saint Laurent. I'm not convinced that sufficient attention is being given to intersections west of the Aviation Parkway, especially not at the Saint Laurent intersection, which is the site of the Montreal Road District Secondary Plan's eastern gateway. I think it's important to be more ambitious concerning public transit, especially leading into the Saint Laurent corridor, and we really believe that we have to address the impacts of a more car-centric approach of the study. This will be necessary for the Saint Laurent study. Certainly, some of the roadway cross-section designs presented during the consultations gave attendees the sense that the recommendations would be more ambitious. I highlight a lead point of the UDRP review, quote, "The panel notes that the cross-sections appear too suburban, 4 lanes of traffic, a median, and 2 turning lanes at an intersection are not characteristic of an urban street. In particular, the section east of Saint Laurent up to the Aviation Parkway intersection might have a denser street fabric than what the renderings show. As the panel suggests, this segment of Montreal Road needs to be more urban and less suburban, consistent with the draft new official plan, and provide a better transition from the suburban character east of the Aviation Parkway to the inner urban areas west. This is also important because development proposals for the immediate vicinity, including official plan amendments, are proposing major intensification. When staff comment on the TIAs for new developments in the area, they basically tell residents that the capacity of the roads network in the area has already been exceeded, and that growth in mobility will need to be met by public transit and active transportation. Certainly, the draft new OP suggests that more priority needs to be given to public transit. I urge the committee and council to be more aggressive in advancing transportation planning in favor of public transit and active transportation that is relevant to the related interurban intersection west of the Aviation Parkway. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. I do see a question from Vice Chair Leeper.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just help me follow this through. If the plans were to change in the direction for which you're advocating, what would that cross section look like instead?
Well, during the consultations, I think what garnered the most support was a reconfiguration of the lanes to provide a central 2-lane bus, basically a bus BRT that could eventually lead to mass transit along the lines of what we're seeing, for example, at Baseline.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much, Chair.
Great. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for coming out today, Chris. We'll move on to questions to staff at this point. Okay, and I'm looking at who got their hand up first. Councillor Dudas.
Wonderful. Well, just not even a question. I just wanted to compliment city staff. I mean, this has been a long haul. Lots of years of work has been put into this. And as you said, Chair Tierney, about the extent of public consultation, there's been a lot of introspection about what we would like to see for the vision of this corridor. And, certainly looking at the sections that will be implemented in Ward 2 in Innisfort, it's going to be a huge improvement from the very car-centric areas that are there now. So I'm very excited about this. And I know that a lot of people in the community are excited to see more of a focus on people-friendly and active transportation and transit priority network. So thank you to city staff.
Great, thank you very much for that, Councillor. Councillor Fleury, then Councillor Deeds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a number of questions. And I do see the corridor in the different areas. I think the work that was done along Blair is quite great. The work tying into the LRT at the 174 Montreal Road Station is good. I'm concerned around what I'll call the intertrans sector, the section that's closest to Saint Laurent. So that's the lens in which I'll be asking questions to staff this morning. Could you maybe, I know it's in the report, but could you maybe for the record share with us, if we take a snapshot of today's roadway on Montreal Road, what is the percentage of transit users when you think of all the motor vehicle mode and riders? What's the percentage?
Through you, Chair, I will pass this question to Paul Croft, who has those numbers at his fingertips.
Hi there, yes. Through you, Mr. Chair, current transit ridership in the corridor is approximately 18%.
18%. And that is, do you have a breakdown, or is that a summary of, the roadway on Blair versus sections of Montreal Road, or is that an average across the entire EA sections?
That would actually be on, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, that would be on Montreal Road towards the western end of the corridor, where transit ridership is highest today and projected to be highest in the future.
Okay. What is with the proposed design, favored design that is in front of us today? What is the transit percentage gains that you're hoping to achieve?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the recommended plan supports about a 45% increase in transit ridership. And that really translates from going from an 18% total mode share today to about a 27% mode share in the future.
So we're moving from 18 to 27%. What are the indicators or driver of that number, and what are the choices we've made? Are there additional measures that would significantly change ridership impacts here?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we have a good plan. We've talked about providing the appropriate level of transit priority, balancing off a lot of the trade-offs in terms of traffic impacts and property requirements in particular. Beyond providing additional service, which is not really an EA-related issue, the transit ridership gains in the corridor are probably about as good as we're going to be able to do. We think the recommended plan, as we say in the report, provides a similar level of service as providing a continuous transit facility in the corridor. So we're providing that facility more in a selective areas where it's absolutely required to reduce the impacts on property, and reduce the amount of widening required.
Could I understand from the data you've captured, at what point do you see like the congestion impacts that you fear are during the peak periods only, and do they relate to only the AM or both the AM and the PM?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is primarily a peak hour or peak period issue. It is present in both the morning and afternoon. We have significant volumes in both morning and afternoon peak periods, and volumes are typically, it's not like a typical suburban arterial where volumes are very tidal and you have a preponderance of flow in one direction and not much going the other way. And in a lot of Montreal Road, the volumes are high in both directions.
Okay, and what did we, if we were in the model where you proposed, where you looked at 2 designated PM peak bus lanes and 1 lane of vehicular traffic, what was happening that didn't make it work?
Did you want me to keep going, Katerina, or did you want to step in?
I can take this one, Paul, and thank you for the question. And through you, Chair, with the lane reallocation scenario, we saw significant negative impacts to traffic with multiple failing movements at key intersections. The lane reallocation scenario would result in additional congestion and queuing that could also block the transit lane. And for those reasons, we do not see the opportunity to reallocate space. 1 lane in westbound direction just wouldn't be able to carry the volumes that we see today. And this plan will take us to year 2046. Between now and then, we will have additional growth in residents and employment in this corridor. So we are recommending that we maintain the capacity as it is today. We are improving capacity, increasing capacity for sustainable modes, transit, cycling, and pedestrians. And that's where we are, encouraging growth to happen in trips.
Okay, I'll come back on because I do have Transect questions to ask here relating to the OP and stuff. So let me just prepare my questions and I'll be back on.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just by the way, folks, if you have wrap-up comments too, please feel free to jump on the board. We'll do wrap-up and questions together. I look forward to you be back on the board. Councillor Fleury, Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I just had a couple of questions. One was maybe Katerina, to you, just a reaction to the concerns raised by Mr. Greenshield from the Vanier Community Association.
Absolutely. Through you, Chair, we looked at different alternative designs for transit that included the median transitway that I believe Mr. Greenshield's noted. So we looked at lane reallocation. We looked at curbside and median transit solutions, as well as widening the corridor to add continuous bus lanes in both directions. And what we are recommending is sort of a compromise between negative traffic impacts while we are addressing the transit ridership that is projected. We are minimizing property impacts in the corridor, and continuous bus lanes, such as the median bus lanes, would not have gained additional transit ridership. So, however, the median transit way would have had more significant access impacts. There are frequent intersections along Montreal Road, and median transitway would have reduced the number of bus stops along the corridor, which would have a negative impact to the community. And also the median transitway would result in closing some accesses along the corridor and maybe some unsignalized intersections. So I'll pause there.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to ask about the budget for the project. You mentioned that it would be obviously, determined by City Council, gauged against all of the other priorities. But I'm just wondering if this is part of the transit budget because it's a transit priority project, and if that means that it would be eligible for cost sharing with upper tier governments, or is this 100% city cost?
I'll take that question. So transit, it would fall under the transit funding. So we would get gas tax for that, and there would be some DCs in that as well because it's for growth. So that's the target funding source for this project.
So it's 100% the city, but we would take it out of gas tax revenue.
Yes, because usually the other projects that get federal and provincial funding, they tend to be much bigger projects that are rapid transit, like dedicated BRTs or the LRT. So, and the city has expressed that the next priority will be stage 3.
Right. Okay. Okay. It would have been nice if it was eligible for.
Yes, it would. It would.
Hope springs eternal. And my last question is around the 1.95 hectares of public and private land that would be required for this project. Are we anticipating that that would be done through expropriation or negotiation, or we just don't know yet?
Through you, Chair, I can answer that question. Certainly, the city's real estate staff will help us apply the real property acquisition process prior to project implementation. And it certainly would be through negotiation first. That's their preferred way of, finalizing the property needs and acquiring the property. Part of that 1.95 hectares is also a good amount of federal lands. There's the National Research Campus that fronts Montreal Road and Blair Road. We would need some lands from them, as well as from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and from the NCC. And we've consulted with all these federal partners, and they are supportive of the project, and they're aware of the property impacts. And I think, prior to project implementation, the city would enter into agreements. And I don't know the details of how that would play out, but it would be the city dealing with the federal government for the land transfer and acquisition.
Okay, so it could be done through a land swap, or maybe even a gift from the federal government, since it's in their interest as well.
Councillor, it's Robin Sushin, Real Estate. I can help you with that question, Katrina. We would look at that as a possibility, Councillor. It all depends on what they have to offer us in exchange. Generally, as you saw from the cross sections, these are narrow strips that we're looking for. We're just widening the right of way 3, 4, 6 meters. They won't have a significant impact on a lot of these properties. And the 1.95 hectares is a culmination, it's a sum of all these small parcels that we require.
And does the $150 million budget include an estimate of land acquisition costs at full market value?
Yes, it does. It's all part of the budgeting process that's provided.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Yeah, terrific questions. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fleury, you're back on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to come back. I believe it's on page 4 or 5. There's a reference to a bit of the shift in the area as it relates to development potential and its definition within the OP consideration. I think the wording refers to some of the language we've seen in the OP relating to intertransit. Is it possible to maybe give us a bit of insight and description of how do we see the corridor from where does the urban nature of it start and end? Obviously starting at Saint Laurent, but where does the city feel it ends, and what does that mean for consideration of the roadway aspects of it?
Through you, Chair, I would like to invite Ron Clark to answer that, if possible.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Ron Clark here, and I'd be pleased to chime in and assist with the decision making for this great project. We're in this period of time where this study is responding to both the current official plan and the new official plan. And so, of course, we are turning our minds to the future vision that's out in the new draft official plan. The draft official plan establishes what is called, as you may know, an inner transect. And that area is essentially just east of Aviation Parkway. And in that area, we are anticipating growth and development that is compact and pedestrian and cycling oriented. So this plan that we're promoting is consistent with this new vision for the future for the urban transect. So that's been taken into account in our work.
Can I further to that, Ron? Can you maybe explain or share with us? I mean, you've done your team has done a lot of streets in Ottawa and consider the various transformational aspects of it. What is your sense to what we're seeing as the 1970s strip malls? Like when I think of Yours Independent, when I think of one of the first Farm Boys in Ottawa, they're all strip malls, like those beer stores. Like, how do you see those transform in coming years, and what would be the typical impact? And I mean, I'm referencing more of the frequency of the driveways as one aspect, but then the other one, the proposed kind of middle left turn movements that I think it's a 4.5 meter lane that's proposed in the middle here, which feels very suburban in an urban environment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to weigh in on that too. Yeah, we, as you know, we've done a lot of work for the city of Ottawa on various corridors, including most recently the renewal of Elgin Street, which was a 4-lane road transformed into a kind of a 2+1 arrangement, and then we had done something quite similar with the Wellington Street West project a few years ago, and of course the Main Street renewal project. These properties, these projects were all quite a different context, and to your point, Councillor Fleury, those were very small lot, inner city fabric, very narrow corridor situations, and what we're seeing on Montreal Road is quite different. It's more in keeping with some of the projects that are being worked on, like Carling Avenue, for example, where there are fewer driveways, larger lots, and there is, of course, with these larger lots, very notable opportunity for intensification. So when we do the forecasting of travel demands, we take very ambitious assumptions for travel by transit and walking and biking. But when we run the model and spin it, we do see that this corridor will have a continued high demand for a balanced system, which includes the need for the four travel lanes for vehicles as well.
Can you come back maybe to the turn movement though? We give so much space to turn movements, and those are long stretches rather than traffic lights. Like there's a number of traffic lights that want to standardize the movements, but there's all these minor kind of curved accesses that have creeped up or haven't been urbanized in years. How does your team perceive that, and how do you force that transition? Because I think implementing or reinstating some of those movements doesn't also incentivize some of the property transformation that many would be hoping for.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we had a real solid look at the types of land uses that are along Montreal Road on both sides, and the scale of the development in the assessment showed that it is quite important to provide for dedicated turning lanes. So we're talking about left turn lanes in the center of the roadway, and that clears the left turning vehicles from the traffic flow, allows them to safely make those left turns and enter into those businesses and institution. And that in turn helps the flow of transit, which is one of the key priorities of this study.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chair, I can get back on for final comments on the matter if time has expired here.
No, this is it. Feel free to throw your comments in now, and then I'm going to give up a summary at the end as well.
Okay. I too want to thank city staff. It's been a challenging year to do these analysis with all the remote connections, but here we are. My comments really reflect the Montreal Road segment west of Blair. I think that the segment on Blair, or even the segment east of that, is sort of out of it's sort of aligned with the goals. I question though the segment west of that, and when I think about it today, I look at a number of elements along that corridor, starting at Rideau Street. We've taken a 4-lane roadway, brought it down to a 2-lane roadway with the same amount of buses, if not more, in the stretch. We're taking Montreal Road from Cummings Bridge all the way to Saint Laurent down to a 3-lane roadway. And then you get to Saint Laurent and you find yourself in a 6-lane roadway right at Saint Laurent. So, we have something to do here from my perspective at Saint Laurent and for some stretch east of there. I also see a lot of property opportunities, and we have great businesses along there. We want to support them, but a lot of them are 70s strip mall and are called to be redeveloped and integrated into the urban fabric. So for me, there's great improvements when you think of pedestrians, when you think of the cycling tracks, no question. Those are the upside of that EA and some of the work along Blair, connection to the LRT. But the actual roadway dimensions that are presented in the stretch near Saint Laurent worries me, especially with the changes we've done west of that. So my dissent today is reflecting of that, the amount of lanes that we're proposing at Saint Laurent and the concerns that I have. We want folks to use transit. We want to see a significant increase, and under 10% transit increase for what is a transit EA to me is concerning. So I'll leave it at that. I want to thank the chair for the accommodations, and obviously staff for responding clearly to my questions today.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Fleury. And I see no more hands, so I'm just going to wrap up here myself. First of all, I want to thank staff for doing a tremendous amount of work on this. 3 years, 2 years, multiple meetings. It's been very busy. Councillor King, Dudas, myself are very much support this. We're very excited about it. And as much as we'd like to look at reducing and narrowing streets even more, there's one difference between main streets and other streets is our very much loved Montfort Hospital. So I just want to take the opportunity quickly to read an email that I've received from Anthony DeMonte, General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services, at the thoughts of even attempting to remove 2 vehicular traffic lanes in that stretch. Tony goes on to say this would be ill-advised. It's a primary emergency route for patients going to the Montfort Hospital. And I know the amount of times I've driven through there and seen ambulances racing to that hospital. He goes on further to make mention if there's also a fire station that's just up the road, and in the event that there's hazardous materials or there's some kind of emergency at the hospital, it would cut down time and put public safety at risk. So this is the difference. We'd love to see maybe narrowed, a little more stuff done, but that is the reality of the situation. So on this one, we're really excited. Funding is the next big step. I think Councillor Deans raised that, and we'd love to see this funded, and new cycling, pedestrian walkways, making it safe would be terrific. So on this one, I think I'm going to call yeas and nays. Kelly, if you could please call the vote.
Councillor Luloff?
Yes.
Councillor Dudas?
Absolutely, yes.
Councillor El Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Deans?
Yes, from me.
Councillor Fleury?
No.
Councillor Menard,
Yes.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse,
Yes.
Councillor Hubley,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leeper,
Yes.
and Chair.
That's a yes.
10 yeas, 1 nay.
Great. Thank you very much, committee. Moving on to our next item, we do have a great presentation ahead. It's the cargo powered assisted bicycles. And I believe our presenter today is Omar. A tremendous amount of work gone on to this one, and it's a great presentation. I've had a glimpse at it. And Omar, I turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. Oh, yes, the screen's popping on me. Members of committee and council. My name is Omar Chowdhury. I'm project lead in transportation system management. Glad to join you again. Last time I talked a lot about technology. Today it's a lot more about bikes. So Kelly, if you could go to the next slide, please. So I thought I'd start off first with some pictures, because pictures have 1,000 words. Initially, when the province rolled out their cargo power assisted bicycle pilot project, what they actually included were the top right and the top center vehicles in the scope of what they were looking at. At the end of April, that changed, and that actually expanded the range of vehicles that would actually be encompassed by this to include the top left. So the top row is generally commercial use purposes, but the bottom row are more personal use. And sort of the caveat or the sort of group that encompassed typically were tricycle style with boxes in front, typically plywood or a metal box that increased the weight of these types of vehicles just enough to fall into the category of what the province was including as their cargo power assist bicycles. Next slide, please. So what happened was the federal government used to regulate power assisted bicycles. And that changed March 1st of 2021, and that was downloaded responsibility to all the provinces. And at that time, the Ontario government decided to make regulatory changes and do two things. First, on the right-hand side is they introduced Regulation 14121, which was a 5-year pilot project that included cargo power assisted bicycles. Municipalities were required to enact a bylaw, and initially it had a different weight, but now the regulations require any vehicle unladen, so without any other cargo, over 55 kilograms, as well as it must meet these other requirements of the power motor, electric motor not exceeding 1,000 watts. The power assist functionality needed to cut off at 32 kilometers an hour. It provides also that there are some maximum dimensions for these cargo power assist bicycles to be legally considered cargo power assisted bicycles. As I mentioned, at the end of April, the province rolled out Bill 282, which is the Moving Ontarians More Safely Act. And in that, what they used to have was the weight of power assisted bicycles at 120 kilograms. That changed to 55 kilograms. And in doing so, as I said, that encompassed now some of the more personal style cargo bikes that are available on the market. And likewise, to be legally considered an e-bike under the new Highway Traffic Act and Bill 282 is that those bicycles now need to be under 55 kilograms. The power cannot exceed 500 watts. And the power assist also must cut off at 32 kilometers an hour. There's a few other components to that. It must have handlebars. The wheels need to be of a certain size, and that sort of matches both for both. The one thing that I'll note is that motor assisted bicycles, so what we would typically call mopeds, currently has a 55 kilogram limit. And so We think that that's why they chose the 55 kilogram to sync those two different types of vehicles together. But this pilot program from the province will run through March of 2026. Next slide, please. And so today we are recommending that Transportation Committee recommends to City Council to approve a 2-year cargo power assisted bicycle pilot project, as well as the proposed e-cargo bike bylaw. I'll speak to it a little bit more in a moment, but that would also include a proposed amendments to the licensing bylaw to enable the use of e-rickshaws, and then also to have staff report back to committee in 2024, outlining the results of our 2-year pilot project that would end at the end of 2023. Next slide, please. And participation in this pilot program really aligns with a pair of City Council priorities. One is on environmental stewardship, and the other one is on integrated transportation. And one of the things it does, obviously, is it demonstrates the city's commitment to continue to support active transportation. And by enabling this bylaw, we will allow residents and companies to replace cars, trucks, or delivery vans with e-cargo bikes. Some of the studies that have been done indicate that a single e-cargo bike can actually do the job of a single delivery truck, and that e-cargo bike could reduce emissions up to 1.9 tons per year as compared to a delivery vehicle. So certainly there is both economic, environmental benefits, and a change of quality of life. Next slide, please. So we started off with a number of things. One of them was an online survey through Engage Ottawa, which ran for about 3 weeks. We had a total of 835 respondents. And so that, I think, is attached as document number 3 with the more detailed results. But what we found was more than half of the users responding actually use a bike 4 or more days a week. But we actually had a very good distribution. We had 9% of individuals who don't ride a bike any days of the week. 18% of the individuals rode 5 days a week. And then in between, it was all the other remaining items were somewhere between the 9 and 15%. 50% of respondents indicated that they had a single vehicle household. So obviously the e-cargo bike or the e-bikes were something of value to them. And 24% of the individuals indicated that they were from ward either 12 or 14. So that's Councillor Fleury and Councillor McKinney's ward. 57%, sorry, are the remaining urban wards. So that would be 7 through 18, excluding 12 and 14, of course. And then 19% were indicated that they were from outside the green belt. So that would be wards 1 through 6 and 19 through 23. When we asked what type of bikes that they currently have, only about 4% of individuals indicated that today they had an e-cargo bike. But when we asked them what were they looking to purchase over the next year or so, 45% of the people said they were looking at buying a conventional bike, but 25% an e-bike, and about 30% actually indicated that they were looking at different types of e-cargo bikes. So we certainly see a growing interest in the opportunity to be able to use that. And when we asked individuals as to what they're supportive having personal or commercial e-cargo bikes on the road, it was 91 and 92%, so really quite strong. Next slide, please. We also began creating our stakeholder consultation by creating a stakeholder working group that met in the middle of July. And that really includes individuals from seniors organization, the accessibility community, environmental community, and we are interested in including business community, whether it's BIAs and operators of e-cargo bikes. And we will be, should council approve this and committee approve this, our recommendations, we will actually be meeting twice a year. And part of the use of that working group is to receive input on both issues as well as and challenges that operators are having, and collectively decide and come up with the best solutions to be able to resolve these issues. Some of the feedback that we received during our stakeholder working group, as well as individual consultations, was that quite succinctly, not all furniture zones are the same. So we need to take care of, should we allow parking in those areas to take care of that. That there's a need for education of individuals on parking and sharing the space with pedestrians. And the third, probably the largest one, was the challenges of hearing electric vehicles in general approaching, because they typically don't make a sound. We also held discussions with the NCC and Ville de Gatineau. Both organizations are currently undergoing review of both their e-bike as well as other micromobility solutions. And so they're continuing, and we're engaging with them and continue to do so. And then part of our efforts, Montreal initiated a pilot program in 2019. They have currently 20 e-cargo bikes, commercial e-cargo bikes out on the road. And then in Vancouver, they've had one organization running 13 e-cargo bikes for over 5 years. We also engaged our fellow Ontario municipalities of Toronto, Hamilton, Vaughan, Mississauga, London, and the region of Waterloo, who are all in the same situation as us. If we want to allow these vehicles to operate on our roads, they also require a bylaw. And so we've been engaging with all of them to come up with a consensus on best opportunities and share lessons learned. Next slide, please. So one of the highlights I just wanted to sort of raise out of that document 3 report is we asked individuals where and what types of facilities they would feel comfortable having e-cargo bikes operate on. If I start from the bottom, you'll notice that roadways, on-street bike lanes, cycle tracks, and separated bike lanes all received very significant support, 84 to 89%. When we asked on the multi-use pathways, asking specifically for personal e-cargo bikes, it did drop a little, down to 63%, with 22% being unsure and 15% being against. And then when we asked for both personal and commercial e-cargo bikes, it was less than half, 40%, that actually were supportive. 28%, as you can see, were not sure, and 31% were against. Honestly, I was actually surprised that we got 40%. I thought that so that was a surprise to me. But so next slide, please. So within the pilot and the associated bylaw, we're really looking at covering 3 different use cases. First, to the left is the commercial e-cargo bikes. The example shown here is Purolator's model that they are operating out of Montreal. And then center, the bylaw allows and the provincial regulations allow for the transport of passengers. So we currently have in the city a rickshaw license, but we do not have an e-rickshaw or enable power assisted type of vehicle. And then the third is to the right, where it's a personal style use, as you can see there. Next slide, please. And so there's, a number of different rules and regulations that the province has identified within their pilot program, including things like all riders and actually all passengers must wear a helmet as well. A horn or bell is required. Some stats on how capable the braking system must be, that the power assist must cut off at 32 kilometers an hour. And like an automobile, 30 minutes before dusk or sunset and 30 minutes after sunrise, a white or amber lamp must be in front that can be visible from 150 meters, and then a red light or reflector on the backside. Next slide, please. One of the things, as I mentioned, originally the idea was that commercial e-cargo bikes were the focus. And for us, it's very important to be able to distinguish between the commercial use and providing restrictions on those while being as accommodative as we possibly can within the framework of the provincial regulations for the personal use. And so on the commercial use, what we looked at probably about 1,000 different e-bikes and e-cargo bike that were available on the market. And what we found was that the personal e-cargo bikes were typically under 0.95 meters in width. So what we actually have done is within the bylaws, we require any e-cargo bike that is above 0.95 would be designated by us as for commercial use. Anything that was over 120 kilograms, which was the previous weight limit, we've used that as a definition to be able to say that those would be considered commercial use, as well as anyone that was going to be used for commercial transport of goods or cargo. And then the final one, as I mentioned earlier, is any e-cargo bike that was going to be used for hire for the transport of persons, so our e-rickshaws. And those would be regulated under the existing licensing bylaw that would require a city business license for a rickshaw business. Next slide, please. We also felt that it was important, if we're going to allow these commercial use e-cargo bikes on our roads, that we need to provide some other requirements on them. So all commercial use would require a company name or logo on two opposing sides of the e-cargo bike so that we could identify and the public could identify any e-cargo bike that was traveling, as well as requiring them to create their own 4-digit bike ID number that would also be displayed on the side of the bikes. They would be required to apply for an annual commercial e-cargo bike parking permit. That would be $15 per bike, and that would grant them the opportunity of using loading zones and no parking zones for up to 15 minutes. And then finally require them to participate in our annual commercial e-cargo bike survey. That would allow us to collect information and data that would allow us to understand how the market is developing and the use and use cases for these vehicles. One of the things that is more challenging, I'll say, is that there's currently no devices embedded into any of the e-cargo bikes that provide a continuous sound system, I'll say. And so everything would be third-party and aftermarket. There are currently US and EU standards for electric cars, which are called their Acoustic Vehicle Alerting System. The Transport Canada just this spring has announced that they are going to be requiring electric cars, trucks, buses to also have this acoustic vehicle alerting system as of 2023. And so we're intending to try to use some of the learnings and information from those regulations and standards. Purolator Courier has approached the city and indicated that if we pass this bylaw, that they would be interested in participating and deploying e-cargo bikes within the city. And we asked them whether or not they could participate in helping us to develop some options and standards for third-party aftermarket devices that could provide the continuous sounding service that would make the vehicles audible and therefore could be detected by those who may be partially sighted or blind. And then also that we expect that this would allow us to start to develop actually a standard for the e-cargo bike industry on the protocols to be able to make sure that these vehicles could be heard by people traveling or pedestrians traveling around. Next slide, please. So in terms of operating rules, based on both the results of the online survey and staff's recommendations, we would be recommending that e-cargo bikes of all types could operate on the road, on street bikes, cycle tracks and separated bike lanes, but that we would restrict multi-use pathway use to only personal use cases. And of course, there would be no it would not be allowed to be operated on sidewalks. Next slide. In terms of the where they could stop and park, they would certainly be allowed to park in regular parking spots, provided that they have a paid ticket. Loading zones and no parking zones. We understand that those with an accessible parking permit use the no parking zones for stopping. What we hope, I guess I'll say, is by removing the larger 26+ foot trucks and replacing them with 9-foot narrower e-cargo bikes, we can actually free up additional space while still being able to maintain the support for industry to be able to do their packages and their deliveries. And that would be that 15-minute parking permit that I mentioned. With regards to furniture zones and boulevards, we've indicated that we would allow them in designated location. As of today, there are none. And as I mentioned, the stakeholder working group, what we would look to be able to use that for is as the industry starts to use these facilities and test them out within the city. If there are locations where there are insufficient loading zones and no parking zones that would be available to them, they could come to the committee or to the working group, indicate that there's areas of concern that would be beneficial, and we can then review and identify specific locations where they could be used in furniture zones and boulevards for parking. We would allow them to use bike racks at rings and corals. Based on the discussion with Pure Later Courier, they would generally not require the bike racks and rings. This would generally be for personal use. And then with regards to sidewalks, bike lanes, and travel lanes, there would be no stopping in either of those. Next slide, please. In terms of communication and education, certainly we are in the process of developing what I'll call a do's and don'ts flyers, both for personal and commercial users. The commercial users would receive them when they apply for their parking permits. The flyers for personal use, we would be able to distribute them to both retailers as well as make them available online. One of the challenges is that you can actually buy e-cargo bikes and bikes in general online nowadays and have them shipped to your home. So we need to have a multi-pronged approach to make sure that we reach everybody that we can. And additionally, with regards to developing frequently asked questions, both for internal and public users, we're in that process of doing that, as well as updating our website materials, which reflect the older standards for within the province. Obviously, we would continue our engagement. As I said, the key stakeholder working group will be meeting twice a year, every 6 months. And then we're also going to be working to support Safer Roads Ottawa in their efforts to distribute and get the necessary materials out for any of their activities out there. Next slide, please. So the pilot project is going to be managed by Traffic Services. Anyone who is, any of the commercial operators looking for a parking permit would go through Service Ottawa to put in an application. That could come to my group to be able to evaluate and make sure that the requirements are properly met in terms of both the logo or name and the ID number. And 311 calls would come in and initially be directed to my group to be able to handle and process. With respect to the e-rickshaws, processing and licensing fees that we have currently on the rickshaws would be used to cover costs for enforcement and inspection of those e-rickshaws. On the enforcement front, as a bicycle, they are required to follow all rules with regards to the Highway Traffic Act and following all traffic signals and so forth. In discussions with Ottawa Police, one of the big challenges of the pilot programs coming out of the province is the the effort to ticket, I'll say, in that there, as a part 3, they require summons and a lot of extra paperwork. So by including most of the regulations within the provincial regulations within our bylaw, we're actually able to create set fines and then be able to just simply issue tickets. On the parking front, the plan is to initially, for the remainder of whatever this fall period would be, is to focus on education and not enforcement. Currently, we believe that we may see somewhere between 6 and 8 e-cargo bikes in the urban core operating this winter, this fall. And then come through to spring of 2022, we'll begin to have a better understanding as to the potential market penetration of using e-cargo bikes within the city. And we will be working with bylaw to provide a resource. It may be a summer student to be able to help to enforce parking and other related bylaws for the first summer season. And as I said, initially, we would be looking to have a report back to committee in the spring of 2024 with results through the end of 2023. I think that's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much, and I look forward to questions.
Great, thank you very much. As mentioned, we have delegations, so I'll get everyone to lower their hand, please, before we actually get to questions to staff. I do want to thank Omar for all the great stuff he's done. We do have, because it is a component, Councillor Luloff with the accessibility group. You do have a letter, I believe, that you wanted to read into the record before we get our delegation to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the committee's time on this. I think it's important that the committee knows the recommendations that have been provided to staff from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I'll read the 5 of them into the record. So, like e-scooters, e-cargo bikes emit some kind of noise to alert pedestrians to ensure consistency and predictability for blind pedestrians. This noise should be the same as the one being developed through the e-scooter stakeholder working group, and we appreciate staff's work on that. The city should work with retailers and sellers of personal e-cargo bikes to make sure people know how to properly park them in Ottawa. The city should require a response to complaints from businesses or bylaws appropriate within 15 to 20 minutes, as we have now with the e-bikes. 3.1, require that confirmation be issued once the complaint has been addressed. So a call, an email, or an SMS to the complainant based on the complainant's preference. To require the registration of personal e-cargo bikes with the city for easy tracking, and that there would be an accessibility on e-rickshaw providers who do not offer services that are accessible to persons with disabilities. Really appreciate your allowance of that, Mr. Chair.
Great, thanks for your work on that, Councillor Luloff. So at this point, Aaron, no stranger to our committees, and you know the drill. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Aaron Cunningham. I'm the president of Bike Ottawa, and I wanted to come out today to let you know that we're happy to see that steps are being taken to provide a framework that supports the use of e-cargo bikes on our streets. As the staff report for this issue suggests, cargo e-bikes have the potential to transform how people and goods move in our city, offering many people the opportunity to travel by non-motorized means, which will increase sustainability on our streets and make them more livable. And speaking from personal experience, a cargo bike has actually enabled me to transport my children over long distances when they were younger, and it allows me to carry out the vast majority of my errands without using an automobile. Anecdotally, when I bought my cargo bike in 2015, I could identify pretty much everyone in my neighborhood who rode a cargo bike. And today we can see that it's become a much more common way to move around the city. And with the development of e-assist technology, as the survey and the staff report showed, the popularity is growing, and there's much more interest as it makes it easier for more people to use cargo bikes. And we can see that that's also transforming different areas like for couriers, with companies like FedEx and Purelator soon to hit our streets in cargo e-bikes. Given the great transformative potential of cargo e-bikes, I think it's imperative that we get the framework for their use on city streets right, so that we're actually encouraging more people to travel by this mode. The proposed bylaw addresses many of those issues, but I feel there's a few that remain in some instances that are, I think probably unfortunately the result of the provincial framework that has been handed down that has some flaws built in itself. So I'll try to address a few of them here. The first thing that struck me looking at the proposed bylaws, it's unclear in if the provisions in the bylaw actually have the net effect of prohibiting on-street parking for cargo e-bikes. As we've seen with the e-scooter pilot in the city, parking for mobility, micro-mobility devices can be a significant issue, particularly in the pedestrian realm. While allowing for a permit to use no parking and loading zones for 15 minutes will help provide flexibility, there's still a lot of places in the city where parking for bikes is at a premium, such as on Laurier Avenue West, for example, where the boulevard space is not big and it is already dominated by a lot of conventional bike parking, or where there's just gaps in the infrastructure still. As a micromobility mode, we should be prepared to make more space for parking that does not impact the pedestrian realm unduly. And that in this instance is also going to mean making sure that there's bike parking spaces that are suitable for larger, bulkier cargo bikes. We're also concerned that the proposed bylaw prohibits parking on pedestrian malls. While this seems a little counterintuitive, let's not forget that for many years there was a lot of discontent about, for example, on Spark Street, personal vehicles or large pickup trucks rather, being used by service people and couriers and the like, parking on the mall, and generally bringing down the experience on the mall for pedestrians. It strikes me that a cargo bike, well larger than a conventional bike, is actually much more compatible with this kind of setting. So if we actually want to have a more pleasant pedestrian experience in these kind of zones, I think actually that cargo e-bikes are probably the happy medium for allowing service calls and deliveries and the like during all hours without making an unpleasant pedestrian experience. And I think in particular, if the city focuses on providing some incentives for the logistics side, or support for the logistics side, and making sure that there is that capacity in the core, this could really be a viable alternative. One of the other things that struck me and that I think was touched on in the presentation was the weight thresholds for cargo e-bikes seem a little bit arbitrary, and I know that once again comes down from the province. I know, for example, that some of the commercial cargo e-bikes would actually be less than 55 kilograms, while there are personal ones, such as many of the ones pictured, that would exceed 55 kilograms. So I think that has the possibility to add some confusion, particularly on the personal use side, which we want to make sure is not a barrier for people beginning to use this mode.
30 seconds.
Okay, so and finally, I think, and once again, as a result of the provincial rules, the bylaw potentially creates two different sets of rules for for people on conventional bikes and those on cargo e-bikes. Under the proposed bylaw, cargo e-bikes would be compelled to use the reserved bike lane if available. This is not how conventional bikes are treated under the Highway Traffic Act. And likewise, e-bike users would be required to wear a helmet, which is also different from conventional bike usage. Given that this is a pilot project, we consider this a big step forward for the city, but we urge committee to refine the bylaw to address some of these issues. And we'd also encourage you to continue to engage the province to work out some of the more problematic parts of the framework that they've provided to municipalities. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for your submission today. And I know Vice Chair Leeper has similar. Oh, there's his hand right there. Vice Chair Leeper.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thanks, Aaron, for the presentation. I did finally have a chance to do a detailed line-by-line comparison of the bylaw to the provincial regulations yesterday, and many of the irritants are handed down directly from Queen's Park. And I will be asking at the end of this debate for some direction to staff to work with the province on things that may be problematic, and also to work with the federal government, or to express to the federal government the need for some national safety standards. For example, there is a portion of the provincial regs and thus of our bylaw that prohibit towing. And I know from conversations, one of the concerns is that, you know, if you're towing a very heavy load and you have to make a hard stop, which as cyclists, we unfortunately have to do too often, you know, that poses a real safety risk. And safety regulations at the federal level, like they've done in the EU, have the potential to ensure that there are safe ways. There are bicycles designed to tow heavy loads. So I'll be asking for some direction on that at the end. One of the things that did strike me, though, you're not on the working group, Aaron. The Bike Ottawa is not on the working group. Would you be willing to contribute to the functioning of that working group if asked?
Absolutely. You know, this is something that we support. Saying, I know, what a shock. Bike people want to talk about bikes. Yeah, I'm presuming that's just a miscommunication between us and the city. So we're more than glad to provide input and advice.
Okay, with the committees, will hopefully we'll be providing some direction on that at the end of this meeting as well. You know, Aaron, I think it is important that we pass this bylaw. The rules have been handed to us by the province, whether they make any sense or not. And I am glad that Bike Ottawa sees the potential for, you know, helping us move a little bit closer to less congested streets, safe streets, cleaner streets. So thank you for your support on that.
Great. Thanks again, Aaron. I don't see any further questions, so that wraps up our delegation component. At this point, we go to questions to staff. Councillor, forgive me, Councillor Kavanaugh got her hand up first there.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I think some of my colleagues were earlier, but I'll take it. Thank you. Now, I really appreciate this step forward, and I realize that what's been pointed out by Councillor Leeper about the fact that we're basically handed down something from the province and we have to work with it. I don't know how many of them ride bikes, but you know, I think we have some expertise here. I think we have better expertise here, and I'm sure we can give some advice to them on making it even better. My question is about towing, because for years and years and years, like let's say 40 years ago, I bought a trailer for my kids, and still using it, by the way. I don't know where that fits in, because and I really appreciate, by the way, Aaron coming out today for Bike Ottawa. He's got great advice, and really great that he's an advocate for the bike community. But I just wanted to see where that fits in, the whole towing thing, because people have been doing it for a long time with their kids, and cargo. Frankly, the old trailers are being used for groceries and things like that. So it just seems a little inconsistent. Just want to know where that fits in.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I'm not sure where to start. So towing is allowed on regular bikes as well as e-bikes under the provincial regulation. When we get to the e-cargo bikes, so anything over 55 kilograms that also then meets other criteria, towing is not allowed. And, you know, as has been pointed out, you know, I think Mr. Cunningham also mentioned it. There are some bikes that are 53 kilos. And if you remember the picture I showed, there are 53 kilos that look identical to the cargo bikes that are 57. And it's did you build it with steel or build it with aluminum? Did you do this? Did you do that? That throws, unfortunately, some individuals into having purchased a vehicle or an e-cargo bike that is now in that category. one of the other sort of complications is that industry is marketing and selling all of the bikes as cargo bikes, but under the provincial regulations, it's only certain ones, and only if you, for example, are, like I said, are over 55 kilos and meet the other rules. If you're under 55 kilos and meet the power requirements and the speed and other requirements, then you are considered an e-bike, and there are different rules for you, such as wearing the helmet. As I think I said initially, up until March 1st, the province regulation was 120 kilos for an e-bike of all types, and they didn't distinguish cargo, non-cargo. And so when the pilot program first got implemented or came out, we were under the expectation that it would only fall for all bikes above 120 kilos. About a month and a half or 2 months later, that changed, and now 55 kilos was the limit. And so we recognized quite quickly that there would be personal use bikes that would fall into this category, and we accelerated our efforts to pull the bylaw together and all the consultation to be able to address the issue of individuals, operating personally cargo bikes that fall outside of that range.
Wow. Sounds very confusing. Hopefully it'll get straightened out over time. The other question I have is pedibikes. They're becoming more popular. Bruyere has them for taking out seniors, and I think they're fantastic. And I just hope that they don't get restricted, and I hope that we can continue to use them because I think they're growing in popularity. Will they be affected by any of these changes?
Thank you, Councillor. And as a proud Danish ancestry, I am very excited about the Cycling Without Age program that came out of Copenhagen. And as you mentioned, Bruyere is one organization that uses those kind of style of bikes, and that was, I'll say, partially the impetus to being able to expand the rules to allow for e-rickshaws, because that's really what they ultimately are. Under the regulations, they would not be for hire if it's Bruyere taking their own kids out, but it would still be, it would fall within an e-cargo bike within the provincial regulations. It's not for hire, so it falls as a bike. And some of the models that they have are 53 kilos, and some of them are higher. So yeah, it's a little bit of a mess, but they would be allowed to use and operate with those.
That's good to hear, because I'm hoping we can grow that, because we have so many seniors and they seem to be very popular, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to have any restrictions on that. Well, thank you, and thank you for all your work. I'm glad you support that. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Kavanagh, and forgive me, I should have went through committee members. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Omar, for the presentation and for the program. Just a minor correction to start us off, Bruyere is for seniors, so they do seniors cargo bikes and not youth. So minor correction, but just for the record. I have three quick questions, and I want to applaud what I heard. I've seen successes in us bringing forward change technology measures. When I think of the short-term rentals, when I think of the PTC companies, but I've also seen us try new things as it relates to e-scooter that is step outside of bylaw oversight. And I have to say that, you know, the traditional 311 complaint intake and a bylaw response to our programs is my ultimate focus. And what I'm hearing from you and what I'm looking for is for validation that, yes, anyone can, if there is a particular measure, that a complaint will be received and taken by 311 and enforced by City of Ottawa bylaw.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, thank you, Councillor. So as I sort of said initially, we don't know exactly what the numbers are going to be, especially on the commercial side of things. The personal side is growing, but it's still, a small subset of the bikes. For this coming fall, we want, should council and committee pass and approve this bylaw, is we're anticipating more of an education. There probably was 6 to 8 of them, probably maybe 2 companies. So we will be able to have a much more touch and feel with those companies as we start. Going into the spring of 2022, as we start getting applications for individuals who or companies who want to operate e-cargo bikes, commercial e-cargo bikes, we've spoken with bylaw services. We've indicated that we would be supportive of hiring someone to support enforcement of those bylaws. If there's 6 or 8 bikes, it's not a great number, but we will be monitoring and evaluating and to see exactly how we can best support the enforcement. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, just looking for a clear answer. So 311 will be intaking any complaint and ultimately bylaw response?
So 311 will take all complaints. All complaints will first come to my group, and given the number of commercial e-cargo bikes that we expect out there, our first through this fall, it will be us responding and working with the various service providers or companies to be able to educate and make sure that they begin to follow the rules and meet the expectations that the city has. Going into the spring of 2022, the calls will still come to my group initially, but then we will be able to support bylaw services through either an individual, a summer student who could actually go out there and conduct enforcement activities.
Okay. I guess I don't know if it can be given as direction, but I'd be looking for bylaw. Bylaw does have parking officers, and expanding their roles and responsibilities to support enforcement measures of this sort of pilot would be from my perspective, a best practice. We're struggling with e-scooters now, and police not monitoring daily, doing blitzes, and bylaw not doing it. So I hope that we don't find ourselves in the same environment. I don't want to pretend problems, but when there is reported challenges, those standard operating procedure and timely responses are important.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, Councillor. The commitment from Traffic Services is that enforcement is important, and that initially we want to encourage, encourage proper activity and action, but enforcement is important, and we will work with bylaw services going into the spring of 2022 when we have a better indication of what the actual market and the penetration is of the number of vehicles that we're actually dealing with. It's important to understand that this is going to be industry led in terms of organizations, like I mentioned before during my presentation. Vancouver has been operating with one company with 13 bikes over the course of the last 5 years. Montreal started their program in 2019. They currently have 20 commercial e-cargo bikes out on the streets. And so the numbers, we can't be totally sure. We've estimated that we could see up to 25 by the end, because we are taking a leadership role here in Ontario. But to be totally honest, I cannot tell you the exact number we're going to have. It really depends. If we can show that there's value, and companies can see the value in switching towards an e-cargo bike mentality and use case, the numbers can grow, and that's certainly what we want to do. Is we want to take trucks off the road and switch them over to these more eco-friendly, safer modes of transportation.
100%, and appreciate the context you're giving. Is it possible to, in coming months, when that becomes clear, if you're able to share with my colleagues and I on committee, kind of the standard operating procedure from complaint to a response, like who's involved and how that works?
Yes,
Just
certainly.
thank you. The two other quick questions relating to insurance. So a driver of a commercial, I'm talking commercial cargo bike, just to be clear, are we requiring proof of insurance in the program?
We are not. Currently, that would fall under the, I have to remember the right word, I'll say the commercial general liability insurance of the company. That would be for any sort of injuries or accidents. All collisions must be reported to police as well. So, but there is currently no requirement for insurance specifically for the e-cargo bikes.
Commercial. I'm worried about what that means, because if I'm a pedestrian and I'm hit and I need significantly, chiro, physio, whatever it is, I want that driver or that company to have a liability insurance, so then I'm covered. So why wouldn't we require it for the commercial cargo group?
Through you, Chair. The challenge is that, well, if you are injured through a collision, you can take legal action against the corporation. Requiring all corporation, they generally have general commercial liability insurance as a corporation. So requiring them to provide additional proof or additional insurance requirements, we didn't think that was required.
Okay, I'll take it offline. I wonder if I could get legal to maybe give that context. I want to reassure residents who have raised questions to me in the past relating to injuries of e-scooters or Uber drivers particularly, and I sort of see that in similar class.
Perhaps I can clarify, Mr. Chair. So the commercial e-cargo bikes would be similar to delivery trucks. And so if a business is using them in association with their business, they would likely be covered under their commercial general liability insurance.
Can we require that letter? No, that's good. And I see the chair. Yeah, that's good. Can we require that as they join the program as a proof of acceptance?
Because the city is not in a position to or have the authority to establish a system of licensing, we would likely not be able to require and have oversight over that, which is why we're relying on their general commercial liability insurance to provide coverage.
Okay, and as I'll follow offline. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Councillor Fleury. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't see anything in the report with respect to seasonal implications or considerations. So I'm just wondering, based on your consultations, is there an anticipation that there will be ridership throughout the winter months?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. The indication that we've gotten from in speaking with Purelator is they believe that's probably a 9 to 10 month use case. I know that there is a company that's been trying to do that in Montreal during the winter. Certainly Toronto winters are very different than Ottawa winters. And so although our winter maintenance staff do a great job of keeping the roads clear and operational, if it's minus 30 with a wind chill, I'm not sure how many people want to be riding for 8 hours on a e-cargo bike. Well, perhaps Councillor Vice Chair Leeper does, but for 8 hours on an e-cargo bike may not be what people want to get paid for. So.
Right. I think it might be important, as you develop these educational materials, to consider, because obviously, there'd be reduced parking, there'd be, narrower lanes, and I don't put it past the brave souls in Ottawa to try it out. So I just wanted to flag that because I didn't see it reflected in the report, and I think it should be on our radar, especially as the technology perhaps will increase and perhaps better bikes will be on the market that might be, tougher stock. So just wanted to flag it, but great work on this, hugely supportive.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. On to Councillor Judas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to get back to a point that another councillor was asking about, and maybe I'm missing this, but why would it matter how much it weighs? I could see why the width would matter, because once again, more space, but who cares how much it weighs? I'm just trying to understand this. I know this is a provincial matter, but why?
And why 55 through you, Chair, and Councillor, why 55 and not 57 or 59? I'm sure there's plenty of debates. As I mentioned, the provincial regulations for motor assisted bicycles, so that's typically what would be considered a moped, and more often they were 50cc gasoline engines, but now the style. So Bill 282, which is the Moving Ontarians More Safely Act, has actually 3 categories of e-cargo bike of e-bikes. One is the regular what they call conventional fork and frame, which is really relevant to our discussion. There's also a category for motor scooter style or scooter style, so it's sort of like more like an electric Vespa, and then a motorcycle style. But the mopeds that have been in existence for, I don't remember if it's 15 years or what, for the regulations, are set at 55 kilograms. And so it's our estimation. We haven't been able to get confirmation from the province on this, but it's our guess that they chose 55 so that way the motor assisted bicycles and the power assisted bicycles have the same weight category or weight limit.
Okay. One of the interesting elements from the provincial legislation, right? I look forward to seeing how that all gets rectified. I did want to ask as well too, in terms of and maybe it was in the report and I missed it, but in terms of e-cargo bikes using parking spots, which I'm completely fine with, would the non-commercial privately owned ones, would they have to pay for parking as a car would?
As of today, yes. We will learn a lot from this pilot program. We'll learn certainly what sort of a level of adoption. I know that, and I don't remember when exactly, the bike parking strategy had been presented to committee. And I know that there's efforts on making sure that we expand bike parking facilities. So, whether or not using on-street parking would be required still as we expand that, sort of an unknown. But yes, they would be required to pay for parking.
Okay, so I would really like to know, as the pilot goes forward, if staff could keep an eye on that, because personally, I would like to see the fees waived for e-cargo bikes to park, even if it is on the street, because once again, you can I drive a motorcycle and I park in the spot and they take up more room than I do. So I'm sure that we can find a way to encourage people to use active transportation methods and not charge them as a car would. So I'd really like to see if you can continue to focus in on that, so that when we come to the end of the results and recommendations, if we can consider waiving those fees for them to use parking spots that are meant for cars. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I know I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse on this one, because I know you mentioned it a couple later and a couple others are interested, but I'm really focusing in on the commercial aspect and the last mile delivery. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us as a city to really focus in on providing multiple options for not just residents, but also commercial entities to help us achieve our climate goals and to make sure we're really reducing those greenhouse gas emissions. So I noticed in the report that it noted that there is the cycling logistics centers that have been implemented in some jurisdictions. Because I was thinking about that, and once again, I don't know where the headquarters are currently of, say, Perlator or some of the other delivery entities. But would the city, or can the city, as you're looking at this pilot, also take into consideration if there is any land, and I assume in the core would be the best, maybe as part of the byward market redevelopment, but I'm just throwing that out there, where we could entertain having one of these logistics centers, of course, at the company's expense, but keeping some kind of concept land location in the back of our minds where this would be conducive. Because once again, if we're going to see options like this be successful, we need to think a couple steps ahead and know what these companies would need in order to make this a viable option. Has this been considered by staff, or is it something you can consider in the pilot?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we have been talking and thinking about it. So if I maybe just kind of give a bigger overview. So, I mean, more typically for especially the first mile, last mile type of delivery for commercial carriers and courier companies, most of the vehicles and the packages come in at the airport. There are facilities there where they do all their sorting, and then dozens upon dozens of trucks fan out across the city, all traveling towards your ward and then spreading out as they get closer to be able to do their local delivery. The shift in the model that companies are starting to view, and funny enough, 25 years ago, this week I was presenting my master's thesis on technology for urban courier development companies, so a little bit of a full circle. But the model that they're moving towards now is these cycling logistics hub, and it's really smaller set. So rather than doing the sorting and then around 7:30, 8 o'clock, heading out into the streets and getting stuck in traffic and trying to get to their end destinations, what they're now looking to do is, instead of doing the sorting out at the airport and other locations, is to take a single larger truck to be able to service 5, 6, 7 e-cargo bikes, and to be able to do delivery. Usually it's within 3 to 5 kilometers of that cycling logistics hub. So you could imagine something in the nearby downtown core, 5 kilometers from like Bayview Yards is into Lower Town and through the Glebe. And then maybe on the other side of the Rideau River, there could be another one, and it would be, there would be individuals around. Some companies are more protective of working in an area with other companies. Others are more open. But what we have been looking at and contemplating the potential of being able to identify locations that would be useful for e-cargo bike cycling logistics hubs.
Okay. Well, and as I mentioned before, I think that I don't know, in a winter city and a very large geographic city, how successful or how many people or how many companies will want to, tap into e-cargo bikes. But I see this as one of our tools in terms of trying to achieve our climate goals as a city and promoting active transportation. And it's great to have multiple options. And, if my kids are still little, I'd be packing them into the front of one of these too. So I think this is a really good option. It's a really interesting concept for our businesses. And I'd really like to see the city do everything it can, that although we're going to be monitoring what we're allowed to do under the provincial mandated pilot, what would the future hold if we were to start placing aside some land for some of these things, if we were to start, accommodating some of this in our parking strategies, and most certainly keeping an eye on the accessibility, because I wouldn't want pedestrian access on our sidewalks to be impacted or use of our muck. So I really do appreciate this. I think this is going to be an interesting pilot. I look forward to it. And I think that once again, this is another tool in our toolbox. I'm very excited to see how this pans out.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Leeper.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Amar, for the work that you've been doing on this. I wish we had a little more flexibility from the province in terms of how we implement it, but Queen's Park gets to tell us what to do. So I thought, for instance, it was interesting to see the photo you put up of the rickshaw. With a rickshaw, the picture didn't show helmets on the passengers, but the rules from the province are going to require that those passengers wear rickshaws, which is an unfortunate barrier. One that I hope the companies who want to get into this space can overcome. Just for those who may be watching this and are not bike aficionados and don't necessarily know what we actually mean by an e-cargo bike. What we are really talking here about pedal assist cargo bikes, right? Pedal assist, if I understand what that is properly, adds a little bit of power help to your own pedaling. So when the pedaling gets a little too hard when you're going uphill, there is a motor that'll give you a little bit of an extra kick so that the effort required to get up that hill is not quite as much. So it is easier to get around. But if you stop pedaling, the vehicle is no longer being propelled by anything. There's no motor propelling it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, that is correct. And I will note that there are not a lot of stock photo images available out in the world, and a lot of European countries don't require helmets. So unfortunately, we had to do the best we can with the photos.
Okay. So yeah, that is, I just want to be sure that for those who may be watching that is clear that what we're talking about is this e-assist device. It's not a new scooter. It's not a new self-propelled device that you can just hit a throttle on. You're still pedaling. The experience is still very bike-like. I like to call pedal assist kind of the Valium of cycling. It helps just take the edge off so that it's significantly less effort, which should make these very popular. One of the questions I did have is around the fines. So the Ontario regulation speaks to fines that are, and I'm sorry, I've just lost it. Fines that are like $250 to $2,500. Our bylaw for violations of the bylaw speaks to fines of minimum $500 going up to $100,000. If somebody parks in the bike lane today, they're subject to a $120 fine. Fines for parking for e-cargo bikes, although I hope we don't have a lot of problems on that front, are going to be many, many times higher than parking your truck in a bike lane on the Laurier bike lanes. Why is that different?
I'm not sure if I can ask Naz to step in. I believe that's the number there is the maximum of that the fine can be and not necessarily the minimum fine.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So staff will still have to seek court approval of the said fines. However, the range that's specified in the bylaw is consistent with our regulatory bylaws. And so they range from a minimum fine not exceeding $500 and a maximum not exceeding $100,000.
Do we, and I'm just trying to understand the interaction of the bylaw with the provincial guidance and provincial regulations that speak to a lower minimum fine. Do we have flexibility to propose a lower minimum fine than we are?
For the set fines, likely not. They have to be consistent. We went through the same process, Mr. Chair, with the e-scooter bylaw. And so our advice would be to keep it consistent. However, we can discuss further with staff in terms of the range of fines.
Okay, I'll be interested in pursuing that before council. I would hate to see somebody who has parked thoughtlessly with their e-cargo bike while they're, picking up groceries, fined many times higher than somebody who parks, a truck in a bike lane. It seems like that is counterintuitive. Thank you very much to Councillor Dudas for raising the micromobility hubs. Is there a discussion with the planning department? Are you having letting them know what's coming up so that they can sort of think about it?
Through you, Chair. Yes, Councillor. The Economic Development Group and planning have been involved pretty much from the start. And so they've been engaged, speaking with any curators, as I said, approach the city. And so they have been engaged to make sure that where any locations that curator may choose to implement a cycling logistics hub would fall within the proper zoning rules and so forth. And so, yes, they have been engaged and they are supportive of moving forward both on this as well as encouraging the cycling logistics hubs to be implemented around the city.
I'll be interested in that zoning discussion. for example, a traditional main street, I'm guessing that a mobility hub would not be considered active frontage. So we'd be looking at locations that are not directly on the traditional main street, but in otherwise commercial or probably light industrial zones. So there's an interesting discussion to be had as we go into the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. Bike Ottawa has expressed that it would be interested in contributing to the work of the working group. With the chair's willingness here, could I ask staff whether they are willing to take direction to include Bike Ottawa in its working group?
If I could just step in through you, Chair. I believe we filled in the online form to request Bike Ottawa to attend our working group. It may have gotten lost in the shuffle. So yes, certainly we want all the all stakeholders, including bike users. So it was unfortunate just in timing wise that it didn't work out. But yes, we certainly very much encourage, and I'll reach out, or if Aaron has my contact information probably now, he'll be able to reach out to me and make sure I can keep in touch.
Perfect. No, I do trust that was the original intent. So we'll correct that for sure. The other direction that I'm hoping you'll be willing to take is to work with councillors and Bike Ottawa to point out to the province some of the inconsistencies with how we expect cargo bikes to be used with the province. And then one of the hurdles that we also face is sort of the lack of a national standard for what e-cargo bikes are. And I would love to work with you, other councillors who are interested in the issue, as well as Bike Ottawa and other stakeholders, to sort of formally put our concerns with that on the table. Would you take it as direction to work with us on that?
Through you, Chair, certainly, Councillor, welcome to do that. I know, just as a precursor, the province, when they initially rolled out their planned adjustments and so forth, transportation provided feedback, and the city provided feedback to the province, and then also when they rolled out changes to, or were planning changes to, the e-bike rules, those were also commented on, and I'm sure that NCC and has also provided comments to the province, but very welcome to do that. And as I sort of mentioned, I mean, one of the things that as a collective group of municipalities, we've all been in discussion, Toronto, Hamilton, London, and so forth, about the challenges that the rules have created for us. So, one of the things that I personally hope that by us going through as a collective group of probably 95% of the population of the province, we can, I'll say, encourage through the period of this pilot program, the province to move towards the direction that would work for municipalities. But yes, I'll take it as direction to work with you to provide a formal submittal, for sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Those were really the only questions I have, Chair. I do hope my colleagues will support this, and from the sound of it, I know they will. This is a huge opportunity. I'm just thinking about Wellington Street, Richmond Road in Kitchissippi Ward, and the volume of deliveries and the noise and the contribution to air pollution that the big Purelator and FedEx trucks makes. I know when my neighbors are getting a FedEx or Purelator delivery, because I hear that truck. And I can only imagine if this becomes a mainstream way of delivering, even if it is only 10 months of the year, if this becomes mainstream, that has the potential to make a huge quality of life impact for our neighborhoods. So this is a great way to make intensifying neighborhoods that are facing increasing traffic congestion, a much more pleasant place to live. Omar, thanks for your work on this. Chair, thank you.
Well said, Vice Chair. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks, Omar, for the presentation and information today. It is a good plan, and it's good that we're distinguishing between the commercial and the personal usage. Creating a framework for commercial use is important. Obviously, there's a bunch of currently e-cargo personal bikes out there, and obviously we shouldn't take those away now. So that it's a good distinguish, have that in the framework. And I think we're essentially treating these as bicycles, and I think that's the right thing to do. Anything we can do to reduce larger trucks in our neighborhoods, all of our neighborhoods, for shipping and delivery, the better. They're also safer and less disruptive than trucks, vans, and cars, and they can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well. They reduce the noise within the city as well, which is a public health issue and doesn't get enough consideration often. I do have some questions and comments. I have, I'm hoping we can have more dialogue about the ability of commercial bikes to stop on sidewalks and in bike lanes to either pick up or drop off passengers and receive payment. I just want to know more about how that can be done in a way that is not hindering other users of these active transportation infrastructure.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, certainly. The challenge is we don't have a lot of good experience as to how often and how these will sort of work. And part of that is, through the stakeholder working group and working and engaging with the companies, certainly the larger delivery companies are more prevalent and more visible in our communities. The discussion that we had, for example, with the staff out of Montreal, is that they typically, these larger bikes don't like to go onto the sidewalk because unless it's a ride on, ride off type of environment, if you're dealing with 400 kilos of packages and Christmas gifts and everything in the back, trying to get it up onto the curb and off of the curb is more of a pain than not. And so that's part of the reason why we wanted to encourage the loading zones and the no parking zones and the use of those for those larger vehicles. Again, we don't know the scope and the scale of how many we can expect over the next 2 years. We have some estimates, but if it grows bigger and the problem becomes the problem of finding available parking locations increases, part of the thing that we want through the stakeholder working group is to be able to identify locations that would be supportive of industry who need to use those parking spaces, but also not infringe on cycling lanes, bike lane, and sidewalks.
Okay, thanks for that. And one of the benefits of e-bikes anyway, or a bike share program, is that there is winter operability for a lot of e-bikes. Whether you want to do it or not, that's another question, personal choice. But certainly they have operated, in the winter, and e-bikes are one of the benefits of them actually is that, or a bike share program is it's usually maintained by the lender or the trades that operate them. And then you don't have to be doing it yourself, the repair all the time with those kind of bike shares. So anyway, very excited about this coming in, and I hope there's a broad take up of the program. And I think we already have some of these operating in Ottawa anyway. So good to see us getting in some rules around it, and appreciate all the staff's work and the comments from the committee today.
Great, thank you, Councillor Menard. So I don't see any further speakers on the list. First of all, I want a huge thank you to Omar. How lucky as a municipality are we to have someone that is so in the know on something like this? The timing is perfect, by the way. Obviously, I think we had some great questions today, and there'll be more answers to come. Real quick, working with these companies that are out there, I feel I have a line item for tickets. They just kind of park anywhere in the big trucks right now. Surely they see a benefit as well in saving money, not getting those tickets. Have they ever told you how much they pay in tickets as part of their business?
Thank you, Chair. So I do not have the numbers for Ottawa. I know that if I remember correctly, FedEx and UPS in New York City pay about $27 million a year in parking tickets. And so, yes, that is a line item on the cost of doing business, and that's why it's expensive to ship anything express delivery, I guess.
So it's not only they'll be great stewards to the environment and doing great things, their bottom line is going to see a big benefit as well. So that's terrific news for everybody, a win-win. It was funny while we're sitting here, I thought, I'm just going to look at some of the webcams online and the amount of trucks that are down there right now. If we can eliminate even a quarter of those, what a tremendous difference. So anyway, I won't wax on. It's been a long day already. I hope our council colleagues do support this. This is going to be wonderful to watch. And on that, I'm going to, is this item carried?
Carried.
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 Great, thank you very much. That concludes the agenda, but we do have a couple of inquiries. First up, Councillor Giroux has an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to put an inquiry on this Transportation Committee meeting, whereas on August 26, 2021, there was a serious collision between car and a tractor trailer at the intersection of 8 Line Road and Parkway Road in Metcalfe that sent 3 people to the hospital. And whereas on September 22nd, 2017, there was 2 vehicle crash at the intersection of 8 Line Road and Parkway Road, at which time 3 persons were injured and 1 subsequently died. And whereas on November 17, 2013, an Ottawa police officer was killed and 2 others were hospitalized after a collision on 8 Line Road near Parkway Road, and whereas the relevant traffic collision data shows that 12 crashes have been reported to the police near at that same intersection in Metcalfe between 2015 and 2019. Can staff from the city's Transportation Services Department advise as the status of a safety review for intersection of 8 Line Road and Parkway Road in Metcalfe, as well as any and all measures that may be taken to prevent future collisions and injuries to all users of this rural area? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. And we have 2 more inquiries, I believe, from Councillor Menard.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. The first one is on the broadband backup alarms. With the increase in development in many of our neighborhoods, as well as ongoing road and transit construction, the noise disruption for residents has grown by a significant degree, especially as more and more requests to complete work overnight are being submitted. Since much of this disruption stems from the backup warning beeps of construction vehicles and construction and traffic noise is a public health issue, and considering that the city has been testing the use of less disruptive broadband backup warning sounds, an update from staff would be helpful regarding how the city is proceeding with policies and procurement practices so that construction companies bidding and working on city infrastructure projects be required to use vehicles outfitted with the broadband backup warning sounds. 3 years ago, we had discussed making this a more consistent mandate for construction, snow clearing, and other vehicles. We understand testing with the industry has been put on hold while Infrastructure Services is having ongoing discussions with Public Works, and a report back would be very helpful. The second inquiry is around e-scooters. With the introduction of the City of Ottawa's e-scooter pilot project, we've been consistently confronted with illegally parked e-scooters on sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities, often blocking these facilities and preventing people from being able to continue along the sidewalk or pathway. This is especially an issue for residents with mobility issues or who are unable to move the abandoned e-scooters from their path. This year, e-scooter providers have begun implementing no parking zones and geofencing off certain sidewalks in the city. These measures have had some impact, but have been limited effectiveness as residents still experience e-scooters blocking sidewalks and pathways and still come up upon e-scooters parked in the supposed no parking zones. So will staff consider the following measures and report back to committee with the findings in an attempt to find a more substantial solution to the e-scooter parking problem? 1, require e-scooter providers to geofence all sidewalks and pedestrian facilities so that e-scooter rides cannot be terminated when an e-scooter is parked outside a designated parking zone. And 2, require e-scooter providers to geofence all sidewalks and pathways in their service area that do not have appropriate parking zones or furniture areas. And 3, require the City of Ottawa to provide parking spaces used by motor vehicles and e-scooter providers to establish dedicated e-scooter parking zones or docking stations that are not on sidewalks, pathways, or bicycle lanes so that e-scooter trips can only be ended when the e-scooters return to the designated parking zone. And further, should city property be necessary for the creation of e-scooter parking zones, including but not limited to city right-of-way, on-street or off-street parking spaces, park space, boulevards, or other city property, develop an appropriate pricing framework associated with the use of city property to be paid for by the e-scooter providers. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thank you for that. And just looking at the rest of the agenda, that is inquiries. We have no further business. Adjournment. The next meeting will take place Wednesday, October 6, 2021. Thank you all committee members for participating today.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Jeff. Talk to you later.